And another thing too is find the detractors and bring them along. And that was interesting that we spoke about, not long ago, Brooke. And I think you may want to add a few statements around that. So, and you'll see some other stuff. I don't have to speak this all out loud, but I think you'll find that some of these things are very interested. Um, but
Well, the detractors, that's really an interesting point because there will be people who are either disinterested, they're busy with their whatever, or they have reasons for not wanting to do this. Jim Manico, who we many of us know fairly well, and he's probably one of the greatest um, coding instructors, secure coding instructors on the planet. People don't know who he is. Really, really talented and passionate for AppSec and coding security and security in general. But
yeah,
Jim was really a detractor for threat modeling for years. And you have people, they have their reasons. They're smart people and they look at maybe how dysfunctional what's happening is, and they say, hey, that doesn't work. Let's do it a different way. And those people, you have to bring them along or at least work around them. But
hmm
you have to bring them along because, if you can bring them to your side, as Jim has come to realize that the way we think about threat modeling today is not what he didn't like years ago.
yeah,
Right. And so he's a big supporter today. I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but you go look at what he says. He's plenty out there. But those, if you can bring them along, and sometimes detractors are protecting something. They're afraid your program will undo something they need. That may not be something they feel comfortable articulating, but if you can find out what that is and include it in the program and just let them protect what they need to protect and
yeah,
have what they have that works for them and work around it and work it, include it. And that's what that
yeah,
community meeting is about. That community
absolutely.
is to bring people and say what's not working just as much as what's working. So people have a chance in a vulnerable and safe way to say, the way this tool is being used doesn't work with our flow,
Right.
for
Yep,
instance,
exactly.
just pick something. And then you can work with that and realize, okay, we can have multiple flows or whatever the solution is. And then they come
Absolutely.
to your side. And that's very powerful too.
I think that's a key thing, and Robert and I spoke about that on the last sessions around finding where things fit. I don't want to disrupt. I want to complement. I want to add additional value. And that is where one of the key things in the growth of your program to find these detractors. So recently, we were working with a group, and I know from the past they were a little skeptical on this, and like, I don't know. So we reviewed something that they were working on, and it was the piece that they were working on, and they had some concerns. I'm like, okay, you know what? Let's go ahead and do this, and let's see what we get. Right? Didn't we just needed some information from them. We went and took it, we did the model, we looked at it, spoke to one of the security folks, and also then met with their architects and their solution engineers, and they're like, wow, there's a lot of value in this. So now we have the whole big app that we're working on, right? It's multiple components. It's like like the director was like, this is helpful, this is the kind of stuff we need to know. And so it's really, you find when you start meeting and talking, and you just keep at it, it grows. So that's kind of, what we see here. So one of the other
You
things,
highlighted, John, really
with it,
important is the thing you said right at the beginning. You've got to demonstrate value. And,
yes.
when I start a program, it's me doing the threat modeling to start out. I show at least a few people, hey, look, this has value. It's going to be great for you. It's
hmm
going to be better. And that just right there. So it's called pro-social modeling. Just so you know, there's a name
Yeah.
for this. You can go look, people can go look at that up.
Yeah.
You're modeling not only the way the value, but also the way you
Yeah.
want the program to happen. And that's
Absolutely.
very important because people, if you're leading, they take cues from you.
Yeah. So that, this slide here, we talk about that value delivery, and just sort of my quote here is around things can grow, they become, and will lead to the point where we don't know if we're meeting our needs. So not to mention, are we delivering with quality? We got to measure and show this value constantly and consistently. So that way people, they're willing to adopt. We're actually helping. So we think about different ways of how do we look at that, right? So talk about how do we enable to save time and money, the value delivered from our modeling efforts. We think about ways, and I think a lot of people have talked about these topics: increased delivery velocity. How do we help teams get there quicker? A lot of times security has always been that toll gate, block, block, block. And if we do this early on, we're giving them the information they need to build a more secure product. um, One of the things is around some metrics, and I've got more coming on that. And so I know, Brooke, and you had a really important metric to consider, was how many requirements were built then implemented. You remember that from a threat model. So we look at the countermeasures that we determine of, like, what are we going to do about it? And then Adam's four question framework. And so we wrote down a few things to think about. And some of these are pretty simple and easy to think about, but really it's like, how do we measure what value is being delivered so that way we can go back and look at how we expand, how do we further grow, how do we look at resources and things that we need to move that forward, right? And so
Yeah,
these last two that you
it's
spoke
really
about, Brooke, when we
hard.
talked, those were big
Yeah,
points.
very hard to measure some of this because it gets to be a little watery. One of the things you don't want to do is say, how many requirements did you write? Because
Yeah,
maybe the team, maybe the team got it all, or they're going into an infrastructure where it's all, and they don't need much. Or how many projects did you turn because one person has a really
right.
complex, it's the only one they're working on, and another person has 10 small things. None of those work well. So don't use those. I just want to say, don't use these
Yeah.
metrics that people have tried that don't actually show you much.
And
And
that kind of comes to
as you
that point
said,
of like,
yeah, I really like requirements built because that shows effectiveness. If you're actually building the requirements,
mhm.
that's the value in the end to the company,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
organization.
Yeah, I think that is, and that's sort of a great way for, leadership to understand, like, how much we're doing as a result of this, how much more are we able to accomplish and better secure. And this kind of brings us into our next section as
Can we
well
just
about,
just grab the exceptions because people may not understand that very
yes,
quickly.
yeah, thank you.
If you have no exceptions, if an architect or whoever's doing the threat modeling, the team, that there's never any push-pull between security and other things, that's a sign that the person is or the work is not being very effective because it's
Yeah,
a tension. There are a lot of competing things. So there should be some exceptions. If there's none, that's something wrong. I'm not saying what's wrong, but that's a red flag,
yeah,
over the space of a year. And if it's always exceptions, that's a people problem because it's the
hmm,
person's not whoever's doing the work, whoever's leading the work is causing a lot of dissension, and there shouldn't be. It should be obvious value, and people should be able to work it out. So those are two things that I use. Is there no exceptions? That's a red flag. Lots of exceptions. That's probably a people problem that I need to
yeah.
address.